A stranger who came into a family's life in the most unlikely way left them speechless. The first rays of dawn spilled through the thin curtains of a modest suburban home, painting the walls with soft streaks of gold. Emily Carter, a single mother in her early 30s, was already up. She stood in the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the straps of her 10-year-old son-Noah's backpack. The weight of the world rested heavily on her shoulders, though she tried her best to shield Noah from it. "Don't forget to show Mrs. Hulbert your science project, okay? You worked so hard on it," Emily said, her voice infused with a mix of encouragement and maternal concern. Noah, a quiet boy with sandy brown hair and an ever-curious gaze, nodded. "I will, Mom. Are you going to be home early tonight?" Emily hesitated. Her job as a waitress at the local diner had unpredictable hours, and she was often forced to choose between making ends meet and being present for her son. "I'll try my best, sweetheart," she replied, forcing a smile. As Noah hopped out the door and waved goodbye, Emily lingered for a moment, watching him disappear down the street. The silence that followed was deafening. The house, though small and cozy, felt cavernous without his laughter to fill it. Emily's life was a delicate balance of perseverance and sacrifice. She had always dreamed of being an artist, her childhood filled with sketches and splashes of paint, but those dreams had taken a backseat when she became a mother at 22. Now, her days were consumed by double shifts, budgeting every penny and silently worrying about the rent that was overdue by 2 weeks. She looked at the calendar pinned to the fridge, marked with red circles around bill due dates, and a single star on Noah's upcoming school recital. Her gaze lingered on the recital date as guilt crept in. She had promised Noah she wouldn't miss it, but with the diner short-staffed, keeping that promise seemed unlikely. The phone buzzed, jolting her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her landlord. The tone was polite but firm, a subtle reminder that time was running out. Emily let out a long breath, clutching the edge of the counter for support. Just as she was about to head out for her morning shift, the doorbell rang. Emily frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. Opening the door, she found a small, weathered package sitting on the welcome mat. There was no name, just her address written in neat, almost meticulous handwriting. She glanced around the empty street, half expecting to see someone lurking nearby, but it was quiet. Too curious to ignore it, she brought the package inside and set it on the dining table. Carefully peeling back the brown paper, she uncovered an antique locket resting on a bed of faded velvet. The locket was intricate, etched with tiny floral designs, and carried a strange weight, as if it held more than its small size suggested. Inside, Emily found an old photograph of a young couple, their smiles frozen in time. The back of the photo bore the words, "For Emily, find the truth." Her breath caught in her throat. Who were these people, and how did they know her name? Emily's heart raced as memories from her childhood flooded back. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was just a toddler, and she'd been raised by her stoic grandmother, Margaret, who rarely spoke about the family's history. The few stories she did share were always shrouded in vagueness, as if there was something she was protecting Emily from. The locket seemed to be a piece of a puzzle Emily didn't even know existed. Could this be connected to the past her grandmother had kept hidden? She picked up the phone and dialed Margaret's number, her fingers trembling. The voice on the other end was faint but warm. "Emily, dear, is everything all right?" "Grandma, I got something strange in the mail. It's a locket with an old photo. Do you know anything about it?" There was a long pause. Emily could hear Margaret's breathing, heavy and uneven. "Emily," she finally said, her voice tinged with an emotion Emily couldn't quite place. "I think it's time you knew the truth. But not over the phone. Come see me tonight." The rest of the day at the diner passed in a blur. Emily went through the motions of taking orders and refilling coffee cups, but her mind was consumed by the locket and her grandmother's cryptic words. "Earth to Emily," said her coworker, Rachel, snapping her fingers playfully. "You've been zoning out all day. What's going on?" Emily hesitated before pulling the locket out of her pocket and showing it to Rachel. "This showed up on my doorstep this morning." Rachel examined it with wide eyes. "It's beautiful, but also kinda spooky. Are you sure it's not some weird scam?" Emily shook her head. "I don't think so. My grandmother's reaction. She knows something. She wants me to come over tonight." "Well, if this turns out to be some treasure-hunting adventure, you better take me with you," Rachel joked, but her tone carried genuine curiosity. An unlikely encounter. As night fell, Emily dropped Noah off at Rachel's place and made her way to Margaret's house. The old Victorian home, with its creaky floorboards and faded wallpaper, had always felt like a relic of a bygone era. Tonight, it seemed even more haunting. Margaret was waiting in the living room, her frail frame illuminated by the soft glow of a table lamp. In her hands was an envelope, its edges yellowed with age. "I was hoping I'd never have to give this to you," Margaret said, her voice heavy with regret. "But it seems fate has other plans." Emily sat down, her heart pounding. "What is this, Grandma? Who are the people in the photo?" Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Your parents weren't who you think they were, Emily. And that locket, it's the key to uncovering a secret they died protecting." The room seemed to close in around Emily as her grandmother handed her the envelope. Her hands shook as she opened it. The soft hum of the old clock echoed through the living room, blending with the distant chirping of crickets outside. Emma was sitting at the dining table, flipping through a worn leather-bound photo album. Each picture seemed to whisper stories of days gone by. A wedding, a baby shower, lazy Sunday afternoons with her now teenage twins, Lily and Ethan. She let her fingers linger over a photo of her husband, Daniel, holding their dog, Max, when he was just a pup. Her nostalgia was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps. Ethan stormed into the room, his backpacks slung haphazardly over one shoulder. "Mom, you're not gonna believe this," he said, out of breath. Emma raised an eyebrow, setting the album aside. "What's wrong?" It's the guy outside. He's just standing there, staring at the house. He's been there for like 10 minutes. Emma frowned. They lived in a quiet cul-de-sac, and strangers loitering wasn't common. She walked to the window, pulling back the curtain slightly. Sure enough, there he was, a tall, broad-shouldered man wearing a dark trench coat. He stood unnervingly still, his eyes fixed on their front porch. His presence was like a shadow, eerie and out of place in the cozy suburban neighborhood. "Do you recognize him?" she asked Ethan, her voice steady but low. "No," Ethan replied, shifting nervously. "Did you think we should call Dad? Or, like, the cops?" Emma hesitated. It could just be a lost delivery driver or someone looking for directions. But there was something unsettling about the man's stillness, the way he didn't even glance around as most people would. "I'll handle it," she said, forcing confidence into her tone. "Stay here." She stepped outside, her bare feet cool against the porch's wooden planks. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice firm. "Can I help you?" The man didn't move for a moment. Then slowly, he turned his head toward her, his eyes dark and piercing. "You're Emma Gray, aren't you?" he asked, his voice deep and gravelly. Emma froze. "Who's asking?" The man reached into his coat pocket, and Emma's heart raced. She took a step back, her hand instinctively gripping the doorframe. "Wait," he said, sensing her fear. He pulled out an envelope, not a weapon. "This is for you." He placed the envelope carefully on the edge of the porch. Without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows as if he had never been there. Emma stared at the envelope. It was plain, unmarked, but heavy, as though it held more than just paper. Against her better judgment, she picked it up and went inside. The first breadcrumbs. Mom, what was that about? Lily had joined Ethan in the living room, her eyes wide with curiosity. I don't know yet, Emma replied, setting the envelope down on the coffee table, but we're going to find out. She opened it cautiously. Inside was a single photograph and a folded letter. The photo was black and white, old and slightly faded, showing a small group of people standing in front of a rustic farmhouse. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she recognized one of the faces. Grandma? She whispered, her voice trembling. The woman in the photo was unmistakably her late mother, Elizabeth. But standing beside her was someone Emma didn't recognize, a young man with sharp features and an unsettling smile. What's it say? Ethan asked, nodding toward the letter. Emma unfolded the paper, her hands shaking slightly. The handwriting was elegant, almost too perfect, and the message was cryptic. The truth is buried where the willow weeps. Seek it before it seeks you. A friend. The words sent a chill down Emma's spine. She couldn't make sense of them, but the message carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. Is this some kind of joke? Lily asked, peering over her shoulder. I don't think so, Emma replied, her mind racing. The photograph, the letter, the strange man, they felt connected to something bigger, something hidden. As the night wore on, Emma couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She spent hours trying to piece together the meaning of the letter. Her mother had passed away years ago, and Emma had always believed her life was an open book. Yet the photograph hinted at a part of her past Emma knew nothing about. Around midnight, Emma's phone buzzed. She picked it up to see a message from an unknown number. Did you find the envelope? It's urgent that you follow the instructions. Your family's safety depends on it. Her stomach twisted. She glanced at the kids, who had fallen asleep on the couch, and then back at the phone. Who is this? She typed back, her fingers trembling. The reply came almost instantly. A friend. Emma's breath hitched. It was the same signature from the letter. She didn't know who this friend was, but one thing was clear. This wasn't over. As Emma sat in the dimly lit living room, the photograph and letter spread out before her. She felt a mix of dread and determination. Somewhere, hidden beneath the cryptic words and the haunting photo, lay a secret that could upend everything she thought she knew. But one question loomed larger than any other. Who was that man, and why had he chosen her? Emma had no way of knowing that the answers she sought would unravel a mystery far darker than she could imagine, and one that would change her family's life forever. The morning sunlight streamed through the living room windows, but the brightness did little to dispel the heavy tension that lingered in the house. Emma hadn't slept. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photo and letter, as if willing them to reveal their secrets. Her coffee sat untouched, the steam curling upward like a silent taunt. Her thoughts were interrupted when the doorbell rang. Emma jumped, her heart racing. The kids were at school, and Daniel wouldn't be home until late. She approached the door cautiously, peeking through the peephole. It was their neighbor, Sarah, holding a tray of muffins. Emma? Sarah called out. It's just me. I baked too many muffins again. Emma let out a shaky breath and opened the door. Hi, Sarah. Thanks. Come on in. Sarah was one of those people who had a knack for knowing when something was wrong. She set the muffins on the counter and gave Emma a searching look. You look like you've seen a ghost, Sarah said, sitting across from her. What's going on? Emma hesitated. She trusted Sarah, but the events of the previous night felt too strange to explain. It's nothing, Emma lied. Just a rough night. Sarah didn't buy it. She reached for the photo on the table. Is this what's bothering you? Emma tensed as Sarah studied the image. This looks old, Sarah said, her finger hovering over the mysterious man in the photo. Who's this guy? I don't know, Emma admitted. That's what I'm trying to figure out. A stranger showed up last night and gave me this. He left before I could ask him anything. Sarah's brow furrowed. That's unsettling. Do you think it's some kind of scam? I don't think so, Emma said, shaking her head. It feels personal. And then there was this. She handed Sarah the letter. Sarah read it, her expression darkening. This sounds like a warning. Do you think you're in danger? I don't know, Emma said, her voice trembling. But whoever sent this knows something about my family, something I don't. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her face thoughtful. You know, there's an old willow tree at the park near the edge of town. It's huge and kind of eerie. Maybe it's a stretch, but it might be connected to this. Emma's pulse quickened. The park was a place she hadn't visited in years, not since her mother used to take her there as a child. Determined to uncover the truth, Emma decided to visit the park that afternoon. She texted Sarah to let her know where she was going, just in case. As she approached the park, the sight of the willow tree sent a wave of memories crashing over her. The tree was massive, its drooping branches creating a natural curtain that shielded its trunk from view. Emma felt a pang of nostalgia as she remembered playing beneath its canopy with her mother. As she stepped closer, she noticed something unusual. A small patch of earth near the base of the tree looked freshly disturbed, the soil darker and softer than the surrounding area. Kneeling down, Emma began to dig with her hands. Her fingers hit something solid, a small, rusted tin box. She pried it open to reveal a bundle of letters, tied together with a frayed ribbon. Emma's hands trembled as she unfolded the first letter. The handwriting was unmistakably her mother's. The letters painted a picture Emma could barely comprehend. They were love letters, but not to her father. They described a secret romance with a man named Victor, a name Emma had never heard before. In the letters, her mother described Victor as kind and loving, but mentioned that their relationship had to remain hidden. The final letter ended abruptly, with a cryptic sentence. Victor is gone, and I fear for my safety. If anything happens to me, protect Emma at all costs. Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. Her mother had always seemed so strong, so unshakable. But these letters revealed a side of her she had never known, one filled with fear and vulnerability. As Emma sat beneath the willow tree, her mind raced. Who was Victor, and what had happened to him? And why had her mother feared for her life? When Emma returned home, she found Ethan sitting on the couch, staring at his phone. "Hey, Mom," he said without looking up. "Hi, sweetie. How was school?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Fine," he replied, his tone distracted. Emma noticed something strange. Ethan was usually animated when he talked about his day, but now he seemed distant. His eyes darted to her briefly before returning to his phone. "Is everything okay?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Yeah," he said quickly, almost too quickly. Emma's unease grew. She glanced at his phone screen and saw that he was texting someone, the messages coming in rapid succession. "Who are you talking to?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "Just a friend," Ethan said, locking his phone and standing up. "I'm gonna go do my homework." Emma watched him walk away, a sense of unease settling in her chest. Ethan's behavior felt off, as if he were hiding something. Later that evening, as Emma prepared dinner, the doorbell rang again. Her heart skipped a beat. She wiped her hands on a towel and approached the door cautiously. This time, it was a young woman in her mid-20s. She had striking green eyes and wore a simple black coat. "Hi, can I help you?" Emma asked. The woman smiled nervously. "Are you Emma Gray?" Emma's stomach tightened. "Yes. Who are you?" "My name is Claire," the woman said. I think we need to talk." Emma hesitated, then stepped aside to let Claire in. "I know this is sudden," Claire began, sitting at the dining table, "but I think I might be connected to your family." Emma's pulse quickened. "How?" Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. It was the same one Emma had received the night before. "I got this in the mail a few weeks ago," Claire explained, "along with a letter saying I should find you." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. "Who sent it?" Claire shook her head. "I don't know, but I think it has something to do with Victor." Emma's eyes widened. "You know about Victor?" Claire nodded. "He was my grandfather." Emma stared at her, stunned. If what Claire was saying was true, it meant they were family. As the two women sat across from each other, their minds swirling with questions, one thing became clear. The mystery surrounding Victor wasn't just about the past. It was reaching into the present, pulling Emma and her family into a web of secrets that could no longer be ignored. And somewhere, watching from the shadows, was someone who knew far more than either of them could imagine. The air in the house felt heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves were aware of the secrets spilling out. Emma sat at the kitchen table, her hands gripping her coffee cup, the warmth doing little to ease her trembling fingers. Across from her, Claire sat with an equally anxious expression. "So," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper, "if my grandfather was Victor, and your mother wrote those letters, what does that make us?" Emma looked up, her mind racing. "Cousins, half-sisters, I don't know. None of this makes sense yet." Claire nodded slowly, her gaze falling to the photograph between them. "But someone out there knows. Someone who sent us this." A sharp knock on the door interrupted their conversation, making both women jump. Emma exchanged a tense glance with Claire before standing up cautiously. She approached the door, her heart pounding. When she opened it, she was greeted by Sarah, who looked more worried than usual. "I'm sorry to bother you again, but I thought you should see this," Sarah said, handing Emma a folded piece of paper. Emma took it, her stomach churning. The note was brief but chilling. "You're closer to the truth than you think, but some doors are better left closed." The three women sat in the living room, the note resting on the coffee table like an uninvited guest. Sarah, usually the calm voice of reason, was visibly shaken. "This is getting dangerous," Sarah said. "Whoever is behind this clearly doesn't want you digging any deeper." "That's not an option anymore," Emma replied, her voice resolute. "I need to know what's going on, not just for me but for my family." Claire nodded in agreement. "If my grandfather is at the center of this, I need answers too." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of Ethan's laughter upstairs. Emma frowned. It was the first time in days she'd heard him laugh, and under normal circumstances, it would have been a relief, but something about it felt off, forced, almost hollow. She excused herself and went upstairs, knocking lightly on Ethan's door. "Ethan, can I come in?" "Sure," came the reply, but it sounded hesitant. When Emma stepped inside, she found Ethan sitting at his desk, his phone hastily shoved into a drawer. "What's up, Mom?" he asked, a little too casually. Emma's eyes narrowed. "Who were you talking to?" "Nobody," Ethan replied quickly, his gaze darting to the closed drawer. Emma walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Ethan, if something's going on, you need to tell me. This is serious." Ethan sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I've been getting messages. Weird ones. From someone who says they know you." Emma's heart sank. "What kind of messages?" Ethan hesitated before pulling out his phone and unlocking it. He showed her a series of texts from an unknown number. "Your mom is digging too deep. Tell her to stop asking questions. If she doesn't, there will be consequences." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She had been so focused on the mystery that she hadn't considered how it might be affecting her children. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emma asked, her voice shaking. "I didn't want to scare you," Ethan admitted. "But now, I think you need to see this." He handed her a photo attached to the most recent message. It was a picture of their house, taken from the street. That night, Emma barely slept. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the events of the day. Who was watching them? And why were they so determined to keep her from uncovering the truth? The next morning, Claire suggested they visit the town archives. If Victor lived here, there might be some records about him, she reasoned. The archives were housed in an old brick building that smelled faintly of mildew and dust. An elderly librarian greeted them and helped them locate the records from the 1980s, the time period referenced in the letters. As Emma and Claire sifted through newspaper clippings and property records, a pattern began to emerge. Victor had lived in the town for several years, but had disappeared suddenly in 1987. Around the same time, there were reports of a violent altercation near the old willow tree, an incident that had never been solved. Emma's hands trembled as she read the article. "Do you think this has something to do with his disappearance?" she asked Claire. Claire nodded grimly. "It has to. But why would someone go to such lengths to cover it up?" Their search led them to an address, a run-down house on the outskirts of town that had once belonged to Victor. Emma and Claire decided to visit, despite Sarah's protests. The house was dilapidated, its windows boarded up, and the yard overgrown with weeds. As they approached, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Inside, the air was stale, and the floorboards creaked under their weight. They searched the house room by room, finding little more than dust and decay, until Claire stumbled upon a hidden compartment in the floor. Inside was a small metal box, similar to the one Emma had found beneath the willow tree. Claire opened it carefully, revealing a stack of Polaroid photos and a single cassette tape. The photos showed Victor with a young woman, Emma's mother. They looked happy, their faces glowing with a love that transcended the black and white images. But the last photo was different. It showed Victor lying on the ground near the willow tree, his eyes wide with fear. Emma felt her stomach churn. This proves he didn't just disappear. Something happened to him. Claire held up the cassette tape. And maybe this will tell us what. Back at Emma's house, they borrowed an old cassette player from Sarah and gathered around it nervously. When Claire pressed play, Victor's voice crackled to life, distorted but unmistakable. "If you're listening to this," he began, "it means I didn't make it." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "I've made enemies, powerful ones," Victor continued. "They know about Emma, and they'll do anything to keep the truth buried. But she deserves to know where she comes from. Protect her, no matter what." The tape ended abruptly, leaving Emma and Claire in stunned silence. "What now?" Claire whispered. "We keep going," Emma said firmly. "Whoever's behind this won't scare us into silence." But as she spoke, a shadow moved outside the window, and a cold realization washed over her. They weren't alone. The cassette tape's chilling final words echoed in Emma's mind long after the recording stopped. "Protect her, no matter what." Victor's voice was hauntingly familiar, as though she had heard its cadence in her own voice, a genetic echo she could no longer deny. The room was silent, save for the hum of the old cassette player. Claire broke the stillness. "Victor was afraid for you, Emma. He knew something terrible was coming." Emma clenched her fists, her breath shallow. "But why would anyone care about me? I wasn't even born yet when all of this happened." Claire looked thoughtful, her eyes narrowing. "It's not just about you. It's about what you represent. Victor wasn't just running from someone. He was protecting something tied to your family." Sarah, who had been standing by the window, suddenly turned. "We're being watched." Emma and Claire snapped their heads toward her. Sarah pointed to the street. A black car idled near the curb, its tinted windows making it impossible to see inside. Emma's heart pounded. "They've been following us ever since we went to the archives." Claire grabbed Emma's arm. "We need answers, and fast. Whoever they are, they're getting bolder." Desperate to untangle the web of lies, Emma decided to return to the willow tree, the site where Victor had been photographed in the Polaroids. Something told her the answers lay there, buried beneath decades of silence. The trio ventured out under the cover of night, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The willow tree stood like a sentinel, its drooping branches swaying in the wind. As they approached, Emma's foot hit something hard. She bent down and uncovered a rusted metal box, its lid sealed tight. Her hands trembled as she pried it open. Inside was a stack of old documents, a small revolver, and a sealed envelope marked with Victor's initials. Emma's fingers hovered over the envelope. She tore it open, revealing a letter written in a hurried, uneven hand. Asterisk, asterisk, Emma. If you're reading this, you've found the last piece of the puzzle. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you know about your family. Your mother and I, we were part of something bigger, something dangerous. They wanted to use us to create a legacy, but we escaped. But it wasn't enough. They'll stop at nothing to erase our story. If they find you, they'll try to use you too. Don't trust anyone. Even those closest to you might not be who they seem. Victor asterisk asterisk. Emma's hands shook as she reread the letter. They'll try to use me. What does that even mean? Claire's voice was grim. It sounds like Victor was part of some kind of organization. Something secret. Before Emma could respond, the sound of footsteps startled them. A figure emerged from the shadows, their face hidden beneath a hood. Drop the box, the stranger commanded, their voice low and menacing. Emma's grip tightened on the box. Who are you? Why are you following us? The stranger stepped closer, and in the dim beam of the flashlight, Emma caught a glimpse of their face. It was Mark, Sarah's husband. Mark? Sarah gasped. What are you doing here? Mark's expression was cold. You weren't supposed to find this. You've put all of us in danger. Emma's heart sank. You knew about this? About Victor? Mark hesitated before nodding. Victor was part of a group that controlled everything in this town. Politics, money, even lives. When he tried to leave, they hunted him down. I've been trying to keep you safe, Emma, but you've made it impossible by digging into the past. Emma's voice rose with anger. Safe? By lying to me? By watching me like a hawk? Mark's face softened, but his tone remained firm. You don't understand what you're dealing with. This isn't just about family secrets. It's about power, and the lengths people will go to keep it. Emma stepped forward, her flashlight illuminating Mark's face. If you've been keeping this from me, what else aren't you telling me? Who are these people, and why do they care about me? Mark's shoulders sagged. You're the key, Emma. Your DNA ties you to Victor and to the legacy they were trying to create. It's not just a coincidence. They see you as their future. The weight of his words hit Emma like a tidal wave. Her entire life, she had felt ordinary, insignificant even. But now, she was being told she was part of something far bigger than herself, something she didn't ask for and couldn't escape. Claire interjected, her voice trembling. What do they want from her? Mark hesitated, his gaze dropping to the ground. Control. Victor was supposed to lead them, but he refused. Now they're looking for someone else to take his place, and they think Emma is the perfect candidate. Emma's head spun. No, I don't want any part of this. I just want to live my life. Mark's voice hardened. It's not that simple. They won't stop until they have you, or until you're dead. Emma felt trapped, as though the walls were closing in around her. So what do I do? Run? Hide? Fight back? Mark placed a hand on her shoulder. You need to finish what Victor started. Expose them. Destroy their control before they destroy you. Claire stepped forward, her voice resolute. We'll help you, Emma, whatever it takes. Sarah nodded, her earlier fear replaced with determination. This isn't just about you. It's about protecting everyone they've hurt. Emma looked at the box in her hands, the weight of its contents a physical reminder of the burden she now carried. The revolver gleamed under the moonlight, a symbol of the fight ahead. Taking a deep breath, Emma squared her shoulders. If they want a fight, we'll give them one. But as the group turned to leave, a sudden sound froze them in their tracks. The unmistakable click of a gun being cocked echoed through the night. From the shadows, a voice called out, cold and unforgiving. You should have stayed out of this, Emma. And for the first time, Emma realized just how far her enemies were willing to go to keep their secrets buried. Emma froze as the voice cut through the darkness, sending a chill down her spine. Her heart pounded, adrenaline surging as the group turned to face their adversary. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, their face obscured by a scarf and hat. They held a gun, pointed directly at Emma. "Drop the box," the stranger demanded, their tone icy and unwavering. Mark stepped forward, raising his hands. "Please, let's not do this. She doesn't have to be involved." The stranger laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "You've been trying to keep her out of this for years, but it's too late. She's in deeper than you think." Emma clutched the box tightly, defiance flashing in her eyes. "If I'm so important to you, then why try to kill me? What do you really want?" The stranger hesitated, their grip on the gun faltering for just a moment. "It's not about you, Emma. It's about what you carry, Victor's legacy. Your father thought he could destroy us, but he underestimated the system." Emma's voice rose, filled with anger and desperation. "My father? He wasn't a part of your system. He wanted to protect me." The stranger stepped closer, their voice lowering to a sinister whisper. "And he paid the price. Do you want to make the same mistake?" Claire, standing protectively beside Emma, decided to act. "You think you can intimidate her into submission? She's stronger than you'll ever know." The stranger smirked, lowering the gun slightly. "You don't even know the half of it. Do you, Emma? Has anyone told you the real reason Victor ran?" Emma's hands trembled. "What are you talking about?" The stranger pulled a folded piece of paper from their pocket and tossed it at Emma's feet. "Read it. See for yourself." Emma hesitated, then bent down to retrieve the paper. Her eyes scanned the document, and as she read, the color drained from her face. The paper was a birth certificate, hers, but in the section for father, the name was not Victor's. It was someone else entirely. Emma looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. This can't be true. Victor wasn't my father." The stranger nodded, their expression a mix of triumph and pity. "Victor raised you as his own to protect you. Your biological father was one of us, a powerful man who believed in the cause. But Victor stole you away to stop him from using you." Emma felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Everything she thought she knew about her identity, her family, her purpose, it was all a lie. Mark stepped forward, his face pale. "Emma, listen to me. Victor loved you. Blood doesn't matter. He was your real father in every way that counts." But Emma wasn't listening. She was staring at the stranger, her mind racing. "If what you're saying is true, then why am I still alive? Why haven't you just taken me back?" The stranger's voice softened, almost regretful. "Because Victor made sure we couldn't find you until now. And now that you've come back, we can finally finish what he interrupted." Claire grabbed Emma's arm. "Don't listen to them. Whatever they're planning, it's not for your good." The stranger raised the gun again, their patience waning. "Enough talk. Hand over the box, or this ends here." Emma looked at the box in her hands, the culmination of Victor's sacrifice and secrets. She felt the weight of his choices, his love, his fear, and she made her decision. "No," she said firmly, stepping back. The stranger's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake." Emma's voice was steady, filled with a newfound strength. "No, you are. You think you can control me, just because of where I came from. You're wrong. Victor didn't save me so I could be your pawn. He saved me so I could fight back." The air crackled with tension as Emma's words hung in the silence. The stranger seemed momentarily stunned, but their grip on the gun tightened. Mark moved quickly, lunging at the stranger and knocking the gun from their hands. A struggle ensued, the two men grappling in the dirt. "Run!" Mark shouted at Emma and the others. But Emma didn't run. She grabbed the revolver from the box, her hands shaking as she aimed it at the stranger. "Stop!" The stranger froze, their eyes locking with Emma's. "You don't have it in you," they sneered. Emma's grip tightened. "Try me." Claire stepped forward cautiously, placing a hand on Emma's shoulder. "You don't have to do this. We can end this another way." The stranger smirked, using the moment of hesitation to break free from Mark's grasp. They turned to flee, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared. Emma sank to the ground, the revolver slipping from her hands. Tears streamed down her face as the weight of the revelation crushed her. "I don't even know who I am anymore." Claire knelt beside her, pulling her into a hug. "You're Emma. You're brave, kind, and stronger than you realize. None of this changes that." Mark sat down beside them, his face bruised but determined. "Victor believed in you, Emma. That's what matters. Not where you came from, but who you choose to be." Emma looked at the box, the final remnants of Victor's life. "Then I choose to fight. For him and for me." The group returned to Claire's house, their resolve stronger than ever. They began poring over the documents from the box, piecing together the clues Victor had left behind. Emma's gaze lingered on the revolver, now resting on the table. It was a symbol of the danger she faced, but also of the power she held. "They're not going to stop," she said, her voice firm. "But neither am I." Mark nodded. "Then let's make sure we're ready. They won't know what hit them." As the first light of dawn broke through the windows, Emma felt a flicker of hope. The truth was out, and the fight ahead would be brutal. But for the first time, she felt in control of her own destiny. The battle wasn't over, but Emma was ready. The house was eerily quiet. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a golden glow over the scattered papers and artifacts from Victor's box. Emma sat at the kitchen table, turning a photograph of Victor in her hands. The chaos of the past few days had left her drained, but for the first time, there was a sense of clarity. Claire walked in with 2 mugs of tea, placing one in front of Emma. "You haven't slept," she said softly. Emma shook her head. "I couldn't. Every time I close my eyes, it's like I'm reliving everything all over again." Claire sat beside her, her expression gentle but firm. "You've been through so much, Emma. No one would blame you for taking a step back to breathe." Emma met Claire's gaze, her voice steady. "I can't step back. Not now. Victor gave his life to protect me, and I owe it to him to finish what he started." As Emma sifted through the remaining documents, a pattern began to emerge. Victor had meticulously kept records of the organization's activities, names, dates, locations. Each piece of paper told a story of corruption and cruelty. Mark joined them, his face still bearing the marks of his struggle with the stranger. "You're onto something, aren't you?" Emma nodded. "Victor wasn't just hiding me. He was building a case. If we can get this information to the right people, we could take the organization down for good." Mark frowned. "And you're okay with putting yourself back in their crosshairs?" Emma's lips curved into a determined smile. "They've been coming after me my whole life. It's time I turn the tables." Later that day, Emma, Claire, and Mark stood at Victor's grave. Emma held the revolver tightly in her hand, then placed it gently at the base of the headstone. "I don't need this anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "You taught me that strength isn't about what you carry. It's about who you are." Claire placed a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. "He'd be proud of you. You're everything he hoped you would become." As they stood there, the weight of grief mixed with a budding sense of hope. Victor's legacy would not end in silence. It would be the catalyst for change. The trio worked tirelessly over the next few weeks, compiling Victor's evidence into a comprehensive file. Emma reached out to a trusted journalist, someone Victor had mentioned in his notes as an ally. The journalist, a middle-aged woman named Linda, met them at a small cafe. She listened intently as Emma recounted her story, her face a mix of disbelief and admiration. "This is explosive," Linda said, tapping the folder of documents. "But it's dangerous. Are you sure you're ready for what comes next?" Emma's response was immediate. "I've been running from them my whole life. It's time to stop running." Linda nodded. "Then let's make sure the world hears your story." As the article went live, exposing the organization's secrets, Emma found herself overwhelmed by the outpouring of support from strangers. Messages flooded in from people who had suffered under the organization's influence, thanking her for her bravery. One message, however, stood out. It was from a man claiming to have known Victor. He shared stories of their friendship and Victor's unwavering determination to protect Emma. Reading those words brought tears to Emma's eyes. She had spent so long feeling disconnected from her father, but now she felt closer to him than ever. Emma decided to stay in town, moving into Victor's old home. She transformed it into a sanctuary, filling it with reminders of the life he had built for her. Claire and Mark became her closest allies, helping her navigate her new life. Together, they started a foundation in Victor's name, dedicated to helping others escape the grip of organizations like the one that had plagued her family. Emma's days were filled with purpose, but her nights often brought reflection. She would sit by the fireplace, staring at Victor's old photograph, and feel a quiet sense of peace. One evening, Emma received a letter in the mail. It was from the stranger who had threatened her, now in prison thanks to Linda's expose. The letter was an apology, riddled with excuses, but also genuine remorse. Emma read it carefully, her emotions a whirlwind. She debated whether to respond, but in the end, she chose forgiveness, not for their sake, but for her own. "I won't let hatred define me," she whispered, tearing the letter into small pieces and letting them drift into the wind. Standing on the porch of her home, Emma watched the sun set over the horizon. The colors painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, a reminder that even after the darkest storms, light could break through. She thought of Victor, of the sacrifices he made, and of the strength he had instilled in her. She thought of Claire and Mark, the family she had chosen, and the life she was building from the ashes of her past. For the first time in years, Emma felt free, not from the pain, but from the fear. "I'm not running anymore," she said aloud, her voice steady. "This is my life, and I'm taking it back." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma turned and walked inside, ready to face whatever came next with courage and hope. Emma's journey was far from over, but she had found her footing. The past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. In its place was a future she could shape, a future filled with purpose, love, and redemption.